The goddess has returned. Roxy, best girl, has returned to Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, and I could not be more excited. I loved it in the novel series, and I loved it in the anime adaptation. But yes, welcome back to another impression/skip content video. We're going to go over episode 20 of Mushoku Tensei Season 2, which honestly, I felt like this was a good adaptation of the source material. Now, granted, there's a lot of information about the monsters, what they're facing, and yes, they technically skipped Roxy's perspective, which I'm used to at this point. Unfortunately, the anime adaptation loves to skip perspective chapters about the characters themselves, and I do think this is one that is actually kind of significant because, one, it solidifies how dangerous this labyrinth actually is, and additionally, yes, it gives a lot of perspective of Roxy and the struggles that she's going through at the time. I think it's a really cool insight into the labyrinth and essentially what happens if you get separated, and how dangerous it is to step on one of these teleporters. But additionally, I kind of thought it was odd that they, for some reason, skipped Elinalise admitting to Paul that they're related in a way now, or at least they're family now, which I thought was kind of an oddity there, but yeah, it is what it is. But anyways, let's just dive right into it. Opening up the episode, of course, we reach the labyrinth city of Rapan. Now, in the novel series, we get a little bit more insight into sort of what made this city what it is, which I found extremely fascinating. Rapan sat in the midst of a vast desert, trapped within an enormous white cage, specifically bones of a long-dead behemoth, ribs alone enough to encase the entire city. At one point, it was nothing more than a small oasis, but the remains of the behemoth transformed it. It was now surrounded by a shocking number of labyrinths, making it more alluring to adventurers. Due to many arriving to get rich quick, the city was full of happy endings and tragedies, currently sitting as the largest and most prominent city of Beggar Continent. That's when Galban spoke up. Now, for those who don't know who Galban is, I actually made a video called The Warriors of the Desert, which is a skip content video. Rudeus and Elinalise actually traveled with a caravan, and this is the point in which they arrived there. Galban is still with them. Galban said, surprised? Those pillars are actually Behemoth's ribs. Rudeus had been talking to Galban a lot due to their current formation. He loved to brag. His stories were always incredible, self-flattering, with questionable veracity, but it was easy enough to enjoy with a suspension of disbelief. He continued, when the great hero, second-generation North God Kalman, visited this land, he and his companions defeated the behemoth that was rampaging through the desert. They feasted on some of the meat and left the rest of the remains to rot, leaving what you see now, bones that refuse to decay, standing testament to the passage of time. This land apparently had some connection to the North God Kalman. Rudeus knew some tales of him, but never anything about him slaying a behemoth. It seemed insane to try to take one on, so Rudeus wondered how he managed it. The North God had apparently bested an immortal demon king and an enormous dragon, so maybe defeating monsters with colossal amount of HP was his hobby. Ants were amongst the numerous monsters that feasted on the fallen behemoth's flesh, and they are cause of the city's numerous labyrinths. When monsters devour other monsters that are stronger than they are, they give birth to powerful offspring in turn. Those mutant ants dug countless nests, and the nests all turned into labyrinths. Apparently, over time, the insects began to die, the nests mutated, and thus labyrinths were born. Rudeus accepted this, but questioned the aspect of eating stronger monsters and giving birth to powerful offspring. He figured that was a folktale, no more believable than eating mermaid flesh to gain immortality. If it were true, the people of the Demon Continent should be much stronger. Monsters may be an exception to the rule, but he wasn't buying it. But then he considered, with the higher rate of strong people like Bodigadi and Kishirika being born there, with monsters being mutated versions of animals, it would make sense if people could give birth to such mutants. Then he wondered, since he had eaten some of the monster meat, what would he do if his child was born and suddenly declared themselves the emperor of the demon world? But yeah, I really found this segment really fascinating, this idea that these ants came in, ate this corpse, and then they burrowed into the ground, and those tunnels they created essentially created labyrinths. There's a constant thing about the idea of labyrinths being kind of living things and how the mana itself kind of feeds into it. In this city, magic items were churned out in droves. Magical implements and armors flew off the shelf. No matter how many magical crystals there were, they never had enough. Everything of certain quality sold at high prices. Again, because magic items themselves are actually produced from the labyrinths, because the mana goes towards the core, it's drawn to the core, monsters come there and die, the mana keeps flowing, and as they flow past the items, they suspect that that's when it turns into a magic item. Magical implements are actually something they have to create and supply some sort of mana. As long as you could navigate the desert, it was a merchant's dream come true. Of course, this was something few could do. Most would find better profits and safer trade in the central continent, but this wasn't something that he was going to point out to Galban. They parted ways with Galban after arriving. It was short, but he learned a lot from them, and they had taken care of him. Now it was time to search for Geese, or Paul. So they decided to head straight to the Adventure Guild with luggage in tow. Approaching the Adventure Guild, he seen many dressed in familiar adventure garb, probably many from the central continent, all with battle-worn faces, probably S-rank, specializing in labyrinth diving. The Adventure Guild was carved out of an enormous boulder, likely with magic. Rudeus could tell because he could have made something similar, but nothing this complex. The vibe was similar to the rest of the city, but there was no newbie adventurers to be seen. Everyone looked powerful. I do like in the anime they kind of show that it's just a massive rock, which I was kind of expecting when he got there. I'm like, yep, it's going to be a massive, yep, it's a massive boulder. But yeah, they go inside there and they look for Geese. Now there's a little more context in the novel as to what Geese was talking to this guy about. They overheard Geese say, "Come on, I'm asking you. You are one too, I know it." He replied, "You're asking the impossible." Geese said, "Can't you just bend this once? This is a race against time. It's already been a month, hasn't it? She's already dead." "No." Geese shook his head. "There's no way. Even if she is, we gotta at least go check. Find her remains. Come on, I'm begging you. I've seen your skill myself. That's why I'm here. I'll even pay you double, if that's what you want." Geese looked desperate. Rudeus didn't know that the weasel could pull a face off like that. "Sorry, try someone else. I'm not eager to die." "Damn, you coward. Can't believe you bothered to call yourself an adventurer with that attitude." Yeah. Say whatever you want." The man then walked away without even looking back. Rudeus had never seen Geese curse a man, though he didn't know much about him. The Geese he knew was lighthearted. Yeah, right there it's already given an indication that something happened. There's a her, they need to be saved and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, this is the point where they talk to Geese, and I love how Geese just immediately is like, "Holy crap, boss, you've grown," all that kind of stuff. Again, there's another emphasis here that Rudeus speaks to Geese very formally, and it kind of creeps him out. He's like, "Dude, whoa, stop being formal with me. Call me newbie like you usually do." But yeah, Geese ends up taking them, go to see Paul. Right before they arrive inside the inn, he's like, "Okay, look, Elinalise, I know you got problems with him, but please, can you just not?" Oh yeah, by the way, Rudeus as well. Please don't go punch your dad. It is, again, a funny aspect of, we're kind of calling back to the time they were in Millis, when Rudeus first arrived there and they got into a fight. And Geese had to come in afterwards and, chill Paul out and kind of give him Rudeus' perspective of that whole situation. So he's like, please don't do this again. Which I do like that Rudeus technically in his own mind acknowledges this. Geese said, "You too, boss. Don't start a fight like you did last time. Got it? I'm sure you have a lot you want to say, but just try not to blame him too much, okay?" Rudeus thought it had to be pretty bad if they was going through this long preamble. Though he had seen Paul when he was at his weakest and running from his problems, Rudeus just had to be mentally prepared for something similar. Despite his appearance, Paul wasn't mentally the most durable. If something happened, he would sink into depression immediately. He wasn't an emotional wreck, but didn't have the resilience to handle massive setbacks. Though, he should bounce back once they found Zenith. But who knew? Again, he's acknowledging the fact that back there in Millis, yeah, he was a wreck, and he's kind of assuming the same thing. He's probably a wreck again. But yeah, they go inside there and see Paul. I got super emotional again. I kept thinking back to that whole scene in Millis, that moment that Rudeus said, "Okay, let's reset things. Hey, Father, I'm here," and they give that embrace. It's kind of that same sequence here. It's Rudeus finding Paul once again after a long time being separated. Now, with this one particularly being Rudeus having that mindset of, I kind of failed Paul. I went off and I started my life and I continue on my life, and here's Paul and he's suffering. I wasn't here to help him. And it's so great the moment that he walks in there and Paul is like just overjoyed seeing Rudeus, that Rudeus immediately thinks, "I'm glad I came. This is enough. I'm glad I'm not regretting this. I'm here with my father." Lilia announced Rudeus' arrival. Paul lifted his head slowly, dark circles beneath his eyes, his entire body gone gaunt and emaciated. He looked terrible. There was no scruffle stubble around his jaw, and his hair was finely kept. He was no longer steeped in a stench of alcohol either. Still, he was at his wits' end. Rudeus was glad that he came. Seeing his condition, he knew he made the right choice. Yeah, they even note the idea that Lilia's standing there and she's wearing the same usual outfit, but it's looking a little scruffy. Like, they've been through some stuff. Paul stared at him, dazed and unfocused. It was obvious that he hadn't been sleeping. Last time they met, they fought, but not today. Today, Rudeus would be Buddha Rudeus. Huh? That's weird. I can see Rudy. Huh. What's up, Rudy? It's been a long time. You look like you're doing well. How's Norn and Aisha? Now, it's funny because it seems like in the anime, they don't really get into this, but in the novel series, it's almost as if Paul doesn't even think this is Rudeus. He thinks he thinks that he's imagining Rudeus in front of him. Paul's reaction wasn't expected. Rudeus figured that he'd be sporting a flask and yelling at him. I took them in. They're living in the magic city of Shierra right now. They're doing fine. I've left them in the care of some trustworthy people, just in case. Okay, yeah, that figures. Just as reliable as ever, Rudy. Ah, how are you, by the way? Doing good? Yes, I guess I am. Paul smiled, flippant and carefree. A smile unbefitting of the circumstances, as if he lost all heart. Okay, well, that's good. That's the most important thing. There was no life in Paul's eyes, like he had become an empty husk. Seriously, this is what Paul had become? Rudy. Paul stood up, giving him a tight hug. I'm a hopeless bastard. Rudeus silently returned his embrace. He was kind of afraid that Paul would never return to how he was, but everything was fine now. He would fix this. This is the whole reason he'd come here. This is one of those sad things that kind of keeps hitting with Paul. It was kind of the whole situation with the letter when he sent it. This idea that I'm a terrible father, I'm a failure, I'm going to try to fix this. Don't worry, enjoy your time up there, move on with your life, I'll take care of it. He just wants to be a reliable father. Paul has changed so much since his time over in Millis. Now, yes, he's still falling into a state of depression, he's exhausted and whatnot, but he's still a father that's trying really, really hard to get his family back together. And even right here, he's just like, I'm a failure. I'm sorry I'm not reliable. I'm trying so hard, and I'm here to save your mother, and I can't even do that. But yeah, so when he brought up the child, that kind of snapped Paul out of it. Huh? A child? What? Wait, are you actually the real thing? I am indeed. So this isn't a dream? I'm dreaming enough to seem like one, right? Yeah, it's definitely you. Paul looked around. Lilia bid him a good morning and informed him that he was out since Talhand left. Rudeus was a bit relieved that he was just half asleep. He felt that he was too young to be stuck looking after his old man. After Paul retook his seat, he asked why Rudeus was there. Of course, Paul knew that Geese went off and sent a letter. He just didn't know that they would arrive that fast. After Paul paused, clearly racking his brain, he asked about the kid that Rudeus mentioned. Rudeus got Paul up to date. Being married, Paul hadn't heard of Sylphie surviving the displacement. Rudeus told Paul everything about enrolling and his marriage, but he chose his words carefully. He had nothing but good memories at the school. Even with its low points, it wouldn't be exaggerating to say that he had the time of his life there. He made friends, found his wife, and had plenty of fun. He tried to keep recounting the events objectively as possible, but he couldn't hide it. There was no denying that he had a good time there. This is an important thing. Paul then said, I see. So, a child. My grandchild. Now, they sort of show this in the scene with Paul, Lilia, and Rudeus in the room together, but Rudeus kind of tightens his grip. The reason why he's tightening his grip is because he's afraid that Paul is going to scold him, telling him that, yes, I have a child on the way. He's afraid that Paul is going to scold him. Why? Having a child meant he was doing the deed, while Paul was working desperately to save Zenith. Enjoyment was supposed to be shared, and Paul was living a life of abstinence. Rudeus was afraid of the same situation that happened in Millis. I'm having fun while he's struggling here. Paul's head drooped. I'm sorry. You're about to become a father, and yet you had to come here because I'm so worthless. Rudeus was shocked by his apologies. No, actually, I'm the one who feels bad. We haven't even found Mother yet, and I'm just moving on with my life. No, I can't blame you at all for that. After all, I slept with Lilia once too. I meant to wait until we saved Zenith. I really am pathetic. This is really a sticking point for Paul, and that was part of the whole situation that happened in Millis. Because Rudeus was like, oh, who's that girl behind you? Oh, you sleeping with her? Huh? What would mom think of that? And he was basically badgering him. And Paul, that's what set Paul off. Because specifically, the girl that he was talking about, he'd never touched. He wasn't touching anybody because he was focused on finding his family. And even here, he's literally saying, I am not touching Lilia. I'm not touching anybody. I want to find Zenith. And I told myself I wouldn't touch anybody. I wouldn't fool around until I found my wife. But yes, there's a reason why he had to touch Lilia. Lilia spoke up. We were attacked by Succubus. We had no choice. Paul said, even so, you... Being a succubus, Rudeus knew it wasn't his fault. But Paul did have a healer in his party who could have used detoxification. That's when Rudeus turned to Shierra, and she panicked. She said, I'm terribly sorry. It's just, I was so terrified of the captain. I couldn't do anything. Rudy, please don't blame her. I'm the one at fault. Yeah, for those who don't know, during that whole time in Millis, when Rudeus and Paul had the fight, Paul, as he's thinking about the whole situation, he does get into Shierra and Vierra and their experiences. And for those who don't know, essentially Vierra and Shierra, they got transported by the displacement incident. And Shierra herself, yes, they were both attacked by men. And so she has some really horrific memories or trauma from men forcing themselves upon her. That's why Vierra was wearing the bikini armor. It was to draw people's attention away from Shierra because she knew that if any men looked at Shierra, she'd panic. She did not like the gaze of men. So yes, right here, what they're implying is that the succubus is attacked. Paul got all huffy and puffy, and Shierra couldn't go over and detoxification him just like Rudeus was doing himself to get rid of that effect of the succubus. She panicked because she was afraid Paul would force himself upon her. It's a trauma that she can't get over. Rudeus thought Paul must have went right after the women. It was probably frightening. Being the main damage dealer, holding him down to make contact with the spell would be difficult. Lilia must have then stepped forward to resolve the issue. Rudeus spoke up. Yeah, I ran into a succubi on the way here. I get how terrifying they are. There wasn't anything you could have done against it. That's what Paul said. But Talhand was completely unaffected. I was the only one who couldn't resist. Rudeus was shocked, not really knowing how that worked. Perhaps it didn't work on dwarves. Yeah, you anime onlys, you guys got a clear idea of exactly why this is, possibly why this is. Rudeus then noticed Paul's gaze fixed on him. What is it? Nothing, it's just, you sound more confident and assertive than you used to be. Rudeus didn't notice it until it was pointed out. He planned on keeping his usual casual speech separate from his usual habits of address. He must have gotten used to it while talking to Zenobia and the others. Ah, yes, my apologies. I'll be more prudent in the future. Nah, it's okay. You sound more like a man when you talk that way anyways. Paul laughed. But then, tears started falling from his face. Rudy, you've really grown so much. Hearing that, Rudeus was brought to tears as well. They were family, yet didn't know how much each other had changed. I'm sorry for being such a terrible father. Rudeus wrapped his arms around Paul. He didn't even have to stretch. They become the same height without realizing it. After a little crying together, they switched gears. Elinalise planted herself in a nearby chair with a humph. Paul's eyes narrowed, while Elinalise's brows knitted. This was bad. Yes, that's one where Paul goes over there. I'm kind of surprised that they actually included that with the anime adaptation. But yes, Paul going over there and apologizing to Elinalise for everything that happened. It's, again, another insight into the idea of this past party. The old party of Paul, Elinalise, Zenith, Talhand, just all of them, Ghislaine, their journeys together, and Geese, yes, I'll include Geese, their journeys together and the crazy stuff that happened between them, and the constant implying that something happened between them. And I do think that this whole thing right here kind of gives an inkling that, Elinalise liked Paul. Like, there seemed to be some sort of relationship between the two of them. But I think the other great thing about this whole segment is really, once again, establishing how Elinalise has kind of sacrificed so much to help them. He apologized, and Elinalise looked away, flared her lips in a pout. Well, I was partly his fault back then, too. Rudeus really did expect her to throw curses at him, because all the way up to this point, yes, she kept saying that she's never going to forgive him. Paul said, I've caused you so much trouble since the displacement incident happened. I'm really sorry about that. It's fine. I had someone I wanted to look for, too, so it was convenient. Yeah, the assumption here, it was possibly Sylphie, like she was searching to find Sylphie because she was caught up in that incident as well. Paul thanked her, and she welcomed him. That was the end of it. Just like that, they both had a hint of a smile on their face. It was like the problem between them disappeared, despite Elinalise saying that she could never forgive him. As Paul stood, dusted off his knees, and looked up to Elinalise, who gently returned his gaze. There's gotta be something there. She said, age hasn't been kind to you. He replied, it has to you. You're as beautiful as ever. Oh my. I'll tell Zenith you said that. That means I get to see her being jealous again. Something to look forward to, I'm sure. The two of them laughed. It was nice to see. Rudeus had no idea what caused the fight, but maybe it was trivial, and Elinalise was being obstinate. Or maybe it was something that took time to heal. Regardless, friendship was a beautiful thing. I do like that. Again, you have to remember, this has been 6 years. 6 years. And they've been looking for Zenith. Elinalise has been helping them. And Paul has been desperate to find her. 6 years. He's like, yeah, if I can see her jealous again, sure. Yeah, then they have a little conversation. Paul brings up, man, did you guys sleep together because of your whole curse? She's like, no, I have a husband now. Wait, husband? He's totally shocked and making her mad, saying, who would marry you? Rudeus told Paul, Father, you've gone a bit far. Yes, I do think Cliff has some odd tastes, but he's a very respectable man. Cliff had his problems of reading the room, but he was honest and unashamed about his love. He was an amazing individual. But yes, Paul gets Rudeus updated on everything, lets him know that yes, Talhand and Roxy arrived in Milshan, informed him. That's when he crossed the sea to Begret continent, and then they went to Rapan. That's when they reunited with Geese and figured out where Zenith was located. He said that according to Geese's information, Zenith was a day north of there, captured in a labyrinth. Rudeus asked, is she still alive? I don't know. There was a party that went in there a few years ago, and apparently one of the members said they saw someone resembling Zenith. Also, we haven't heard from them since they went in it again. That wasn't reassuring. Was it wishful thinking that she was still trapped in there? But then again, according to what Roxy said, Zenith had still been alive when Kishirika seen her. Based on Geese's information, the party that had seen Zenith stopped coming before Roxy conferred with Kishirika. That was 2 years ago. Geese's information had been acquired 4 years ago. In other words, Zenith had gone 2 years without contact and was still alive when Kishirika seen her. That meant there was a high likelihood that she was still alive even now. Yeah, that long being in that labyrinth is pretty crazy. Then again, she was an adventurer. They had been betting on that sliver of hope as they searched for her. Even if she wasn't alive, it was important to confirm her death. Of course, Rudeus hoped that she was still alive. When he heard that she could be dead, his heart sunk. Maybe he had already figured out it was too late. It had been 6 years. Geese spoke up. All we have is secondhand information, so we don't know. Maybe she's dead. Maybe she's being possessed by some kind of monster. All we got is that she's seen in the labyrinth. Paul followed up. This labyrinth is a very difficult one. In this past year, we've gone diving into it numerous times, but it's been rough. We have 4 labyrinth diving pros in our party, but we didn't even get halfway in. Pretty sad, really. 4? That meant Paul, Geese, Talhand, and Roxy? They had others, but they weren't pros. But then again, where were the 3 others? Suddenly, someone entered the room. Yes, Talhand and Shierra. Yeah, it is interesting to note that, yes, like I mentioned earlier, Vierra was the one that was wearing the bikini armor. And as you see in the anime, her arriving in there, she's wearing casual outfit. Again, because they're not part of this search and rescue squad, they're not always around people all the time. Talhand spoke up. You Paul's boy? Yes, pleasure to meet you. I'm Rudeus. Talhand, you look as intelligent as I heard. Elinalise then spoke up. Rudeus, you better stay away from him. He steals what men hold dear. Rudeus thought, what men hold dear? Pride? Talhand replied, aha. I thought it smelled a bit too much like women in here. What's this, eh? So you tag along too? Elinalise replied, oh my, so you're saying I shouldn't have? Of course I am. Just you being here stirs up trouble. Talhand poured a drink and gulped it down. A strong smell of alcohol filled the air. He then offered one to Elinalise. She drank a bit of it after being offered. Quite the crude alcohol. Goes perfect with someone as crude as you. Rudeus wondered if this was some sort of dwarven greeting. No one else was commenting on it. It left Rudeus puzzled. I've always loved the chemistry between Talhand and Elinalise. It's like this whole thing where it seems like they completely hate each other's guts, but they don't. Like even back on the Demon Continent when Elinalise parted with Badigadi and Talhand and Roxy went down to Milshin. It was like this whole thing of like, don't end up in a ditch. But yes, that's when they decided to get fully updated on the situation at hand. And yes, Rudeus wonders, where's Roxy? I think the anime portrayed that scene really well. And the idea that even as they're still talking about it, which is kind of different than the novel series, as they're continuing talking about and debating whether or not Roxy is alive or not, the entire time, Rudeus is kind of, the world around him is kind of shifting. He's kind of being isolated from the conversation because he's kind of stuck in his own fears. A single word had popped into Rudeus' head. The worst word imaginable. Death. Paul said a month ago, Roxy got caught up in a trap in the labyrinth. Rudeus' heart was pounding. He didn't want to hear this. Not that blue-haired little girl. It couldn't be. He didn't want to hear them say it. Rudeus knew that she was a competent adventurer who went into labyrinths on her own before. She couldn't use voices casting, but she shortened her incantations. She was a king-tier water magician, Rudeus' savior. Even though he didn't want to hear it, he asked, she's not dead, is she? Paul replied, no. She stepped on a teleportation circle and disappeared. We haven't confirmed her death. It's likely that she's still alive there in the labyrinth. That was enough. From that moment at least, Rudeus felt the tension leave him, but his face soon stiffened up when Geese protested. Come on, Paul. It's just impossible. I get it that it's Roxy that we're talking about, but that isn't the kind of place that a magician would survive on their own. Sure, maybe she's still alive, but still the chances are... Talhand interrupted. No, Roxy's not your average magician. There's still a good chance that she's kicking. You say that, but we've been looking all month and we haven't found her. We've gone 5 times and nothing. Paul cut him off. Geese, how long are you going to keep this up? Yeah, that's the terrifying thing there. An entire month she's been in that labyrinth. They began arguing amongst themselves. Rudeus remembered Geese being easygoing, but yet was not pissed off. Rudeus felt like he was at his wit's end. Again, reminder earlier, Geese was trying to find somebody to go with them. He's been trying to recruit people to help them out to go back down there. And it's kind of counter to what he said. He's like, no, she's got to be dead. We need to give up on her. But over here, he was trying really hard to get people to help them. It's kind of that conflict that it seemed like he's having. Roxy did tend to be careless sometimes, so Rudeus could see her stepping on a trap. Still, if she wasn't confirmed dead, he wanted to believe that she was alive. It didn't seem possible someone like her would die easily. At least, he wanted to believe she couldn't. So, he would hold on to that. He groaned and thought. He was more shocked by this news than when he heard that Zenith might be dead. He had the same issue when it came to Sylphie. Remember back in Millis, Paul basically mentioned the idea of the teleportation. It affected everybody, and then he immediately thought, Sylphie. There's always been a disconnect with Rudeus and his family, his new family, basically. But yes, that's when he asked what kind of labyrinth it is, and they mentioned it's a teleportation labyrinth. Hearing that, he could almost hear the book rustling in his bags. as if it heard someone calling its name. The one titled, an exploratory account of the Teleportation Labyrinth. How convenient. This book that he found the moment that he arrived at the University of Magic. How convenient. It does feel kind of purposeful. Now, this is the interesting thing. Rudeus thinking to himself, Roxy's in trouble. Rudeus felt the urge to immediately run off and find her. She was lost in a teleportation labyrinth, and he had the book at his side. He had spent time researching the teleportation circles himself. Using this book, he could guide them. But first, he had to make it clear where things stood. It was important. This is an interesting thing because, yes, right here he's fighting, not just rushing off, which is completely counter to the last situation like this. Remember back when he was in, this would be like the very beginning of the second season, when they mentioned that Sarah, they left her behind. They don't know if she's dead or whatever. He immediately dropped what he's doing, went to the inn, got his stuff, and went. Here, he's thinking, no, I got to figure this out. This is a dangerous place. I got to make sure we know where we stand. It was a race against time for both Roxy and Zenith. Even 5 minutes late could be the difference between life and death. But for that reason, they couldn't be hasty. They had to be prepared to save them without fail. Overlooking something important would render their efforts in vain. It could cost them days of time. There was no room for mistakes, or it would leave them with overwhelming regrets. Again, that's kind of important to establish why Rudeus didn't just drop what he was doing and just immediately rush to the labyrinth. This is a place that we have to figure out what's going on here. The book that he had was on teleportation circles, which was taboo, but luckily it went unnoticed, or perhaps because it was an adventurous tale and was seen as pure fiction. The author could have used the concept of teleportation labyrinth to spin a fictional tale, but that seemed unlikely to Rudeus. The circles in the books resembled the real thing. He researched the circles himself, and it had the most accurate and precise information he found when cross-referencing it with other books. Still, he couldn't rule out that it was a reference to a different teleportation labyrinth. That's an interesting thing to note. But yes, for those who don't know, yes, teleportation circles and teleportation magic itself is pretty much not allowed. So yes, if a government learns a teleportation circle, they're going to destroy it. And yes, a book having them should be destroyed. After Geese confirmed it, and he started looking it over, Paul worked on their roles in the party. Rudeus noted that Geese was sort of a jack of all trades. He may have been in charge of mapping the labyrinth. With Geese assigned to read the book, Rudeus decided to question Paul on the labyrinth. For monsters on the first 3 floors, there was 5 types. B rank, Death Road Tarantula, an enormous venomous spider that shot out thread. Poison had to be treated by beginner tier detoxification. Next was B rank, Iron Crawler, a tank-like caterpillar, heavy and tough. Next was A rank, Mud Skull, human-shaped monsters covered in mud. A skull buried in their center was their weak point. They used magic to sling mud at you. Next was A rank, Armored Warrior, a rusty suit of armor with 4 arms wielding razor-sharp blades. Then finally, A rank, Devouring Devil, beasts with long arms and legs, knife-like claws and fangs. I actually can't wait to see that last one. They had only made it to the 3rd floor. Rumor was that there was 6 to 7 floors. No one had delved far enough to find its guardian yet. Again, a reminder, every labyrinth seemingly has a core, and there's always a guardian that actually protects the core. While the state of the floors was hard to describe, the book had some accounts. It matched the spider, caterpillar, and mud skulls. But on the 4th floor, only mud skulls and armored warriors. The 5th floor was armored warriors and devouring devils. After the 6th floor, there was only devouring devils. Nothing in the book for floors beyond 6. That's why in the anime, Geese mentioned the fact that it would help them up the 6th. The first 3 floors were part of an ant nest, complex winding rooms at the end. Teleport circles were always located at the back of these rooms. After the 3rd floor, it turned into a stone ruins. Everything Paul had stated was falling in line with the book he had read and what he had seen himself. Geese was excited to see it and handed it off to Talhand before explaining how the book would tell them which circles to step on and which to avoid, additionally where each would lead them, and what they would face when they used them. Paul spoke up as he fixed Geese with a glare. I see. Then can you tell what's happened to Roxy and Zenith based on what was written in that book? Well, no. Don't get too carried away. We can't make any more mistakes. It was true. They couldn't go blindly in, believing the book, only for it to lead them to their doom. I get what you're trying to say, Paul. But with this book, a dependable vanguard and a rear guard will be fine. Let's rejoice for a little moment, yeah? Paul looked around at everyone before looking to Rudeus. Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. With that, Paul wanted to decide their formation. His voice seemed more energetic. It was as if he gathered his spirits. They'd be diving with 5 members. Paul, Elinalise, Geese, Talhand, and Rudeus. Vierra and Shierra would be swapped out by Rudeus and Elinalise. With how narrow the labyrinth was, any more would just get in each other's way. Elinalise would be the tank. Paul would be the secondary attacker. Rudeus would be healing and offense. And Talhand was off-tank and secondary attacker. Talhand's role was a bit vague. He was a magician capable of intermediate tier earth magic, as well as an all-purpose fighter. So he was in a position to do either. Yeah, as we find out later, the reason why Talhand can't just go, throw in earth magic is because Technically, it's dangerous to use earth magic inside of labyrinths. We'll be looking after one another. Talhand patted Rudeus on the shoulder. Talhand would be either in front or behind Rudeus. For some reason, when he patted Rudeus on the shoulder, a chill ran down his spine. They keep suggesting it. They keep suggesting what Talhand's into. Rudeus would be in charge of all magic, but also healing after battle. He had his work cut out for him for his first dive. But with his work as an adventurer, he felt like he should be able to handle it. Geese would be in charge of different tasks, checking the map, directing, foods, supplies, selecting and extracting drops, as well as deciding when they'd fall back. He was both in command and an errand boy, a sort of manager. Vierra, Shierra, and Lilia would be acting as sort of a house sitter, which was apparently an important job as well. Many clans would assign people to house sit while they were off diving. Rudeus left preparations to the pros, Talhand and Elinalise. He understood that he was an amateur. He could use knowledge from his previous life to think of strategies, but he left that aside for now. If anything popped in his mind, he'd suggest it, but he had no idea if his roguelike RPG knowledge would apply here. Paul announced their first objective, to get to the 3rd floor and find Roxy. If she was in bad condition, they'd immediately withdraw. If she was in good condition, they would continue onward. The 6 of them would explore the deepest depths to search for Zenith. With no idea how long it would take, it was going to be a long, complicated search. But yeah, that's the whole segment of them first finding each other, getting everything figured out, and that's when they retire for the night in their room with Paul, Lilia, and Rudeus. Geese had arranged it, saying family should have some time alone together. Honestly, Rudeus still seen Lilia as a maid, not family. That was all that she was until Aisha was born. And even after that, it was all that he could still see her as. Paul regarded her as his wife, but ultimately only as his second wife. Zenith still came first in Paul's list of priorities, with Lilia coming in second, and Norn after that. That meant Aisha was a 4th, and he guessed that he was the last. That was when I read that, it stuck out at me as so odd that Rudeus, it kind of feels like self-deprecating, like he feels like he's the least of priorities, but I think it really does come down to who he feels is in most danger and who's very important. And I think right here, it still comes down to the idea that Paul sees Rudeus as being able to take care of himself. He sees Rudeus as being a genius. He doesn't need to protect him. But it is still sad, yes, right here, Rudeus still sees Lilia as not technically family. He sees her as a maid. And I think that is, yes, obviously Lilia's fault. She's constantly saying that she is the maid. She's constantly keeping them at arm's length. But yes, as Rudeus is sitting there trying to think about what he would even talk to her about, Lilia spoke up. This is our first time sharing a sleeping quarters, isn't it, Lord Rudeus? Yes, it is. The way that she spoke made him speak a bit stiffly. If the master snoring disturbs you, please feel free to shove him. She joked, keeping things surprisingly lighthearted, but he was unable to offer her the same. He had no idea what to say, forgetting how they talked in the past. His recollection of Buena Village was rather businesslike. The entire interaction, Paul watched with an odd expression. Rudeus wouldn't call it a cheesy grin, but he looked relaxed. That's when she asked about Aisha and how she was performing. Thanks to her question, he realized what they could talk about. Family. They were family after all. He could talk about that. Rudeus assured her that Aisha was working really hard, not causing any problems, but being a big help. While Lilia worried that she'd make some selfish demand, Rudeus told her that he wished that Aisha was a bit more demanding. Smiling and looking relieved, Lilia asked if Aisha and Norn were fighting. He admitted that things were strained between them, but nothing major had happened. Lilia said, I've always told her to show difference for Mr. Norn. I have no idea why their relationship has devolved so. Rudeus replied, it's not something you can control. Besides, Aisha is still a child. Don't you think the most important thing as a parent is to love them both equally? Perhaps you're right. Aisha is my child, but she's the master's daughter as well, so, well, it doesn't have anything to do with it. We're family. Thank you, she said. Now he's going to bring that stuff up. It's like he had that little distance with Lilia a minute ago, and then it goes right back to the whole thing with Aisha, which is something that he noted when Lilia sent that letter down with Norn and Aisha. It was showing how she shows that inequality between the two of them. And he's like, why doesn't Lilia show that equality between the two of them? It doesn't make any sense. Here he's finally telling her what he was thinking then. But yes, that's when Paul notices them talking and gets a little stupid grin. He's just so happy to see his wife and son all grown up talking to each other. But yeah, in conversation with him having a kid, Paul asked the question, well, so who was your first partner? I guess it was Sylphie after all. Or was it Edis? I seem to remember you saying the two of you split up. But was there really nothing between you when it happened? Part of Rudeus wondered if it was appropriate to discuss, but he knew Paul was in high spirits. Being as they would be entering the labyrinth the next day, this is their only chance to really cut loose and swap stories. Suggesting his experience when he was younger, Paul pushed Rudeus to ask anything. Alright, I have a few questions I'd like to ask. Honestly, Lord Rudeus, I can't believe you're going along with this. Lilia just did not want him talking about something vulgar. By midnight, they turned in for the night. Rudeus couldn't sleep, maybe turned on by their discussion. He never dreamed the day would come when he could swap sex stories. That said, he needed to focus on what was currently happening. He wondered if he was dancing in the palm of the man god's hand. Now that he thought about it, the reason that he got the book was because he went to the university. If the man god hadn't told him to research the displacement incident, he'd never found that book, facing the labyrinth without its assistance. The man god's words always seemed to belay a deeper meaning. He said not to go to Rapan and hook up with Lilia and Family. It felt like he purposely said things he knew would steer him up. It definitely does make you wonder. If he hadn't said that, or told him to go to Beggaret, Rudeus felt like he might have chosen to stay. Rudeus was rebellious with the man god, and Sylphie was important to him. He probably would have sent Bodigadi, Rejured, or Soldat instead. Maybe the man god had taken all that into account. He did, of course, send him to school to gather the necessary things for rescuing Zenith. Rudeus started to wonder again who he was. What was he wanting him to do? And if it was really true that he was just enjoying watching him. As usual, he had no clue what was going on through his head, but it was no mistake that he was an ally. Rudeus wondered if he'd appear again in his dreams tonight. He'd have to give him some kind of offering if things went well this time, even if he didn't know his preference and if he'd like it. However, the man god didn't appear in his dreams that night. Following this, they arrived at the Teleportation Labyrinth. It looked like a cave, webs covering the walls thanks to the spiders in the area. While most would see a photograph of this and not have their interest piqued, in person, something gave Rudeus a sense that there was a labyrinth within, an unsettling air which provoked curiosity. He wondered if other labyrinths had a similar vibe. I kind of wonder by this kind of comment if it is an aspect of that drawing of mana. Does it give you that feeling because the mana is being drawn even outside? Lilia, Shierra, and Vierra bid them good wishes before heading back to Rapan. Taking up formation, they all stepped inside. Rudeus wasn't excited, despite it being his first time entering Labyrinth. He just had the weight of knowing they couldn't afford to fail. That's a sad reality. I mean, they've mentioned it a couple times, especially when he was traveling to the Demon Continent. Edis so badly wanted to go, let's go to Labyrinth. And he's like, no, that's too dangerous. I need to focus on getting you home safely, and that is just a risk we cannot take. And yeah, there's like this sense of, yeah, you'd love to go to a labyrinth at some point. Yes, there was a mention when he first joined Soldat. Soldat said that he was, when that point in which Rudeus was, falling into depression, the whole thing happened with Sarah. He was nearly going to end his own life. And Soldat said, hey, come with me. Let's just go. There's this new labyrinth that opened up. You can go with my party. But it doesn't necessarily say at any point that he actually went into the labyrinths with Soldat. So it doesn't really indicate at all that Rudeus has ever gone to a labyrinth before. Here even saying this is my first time going into a labyrinth, but I can't be excited. It should be a fun experience, something new. I'm going into a dungeon, but he can't because there's these two things within his mind that really does dampen it. I have to find Roxy, I have to find Zenith, and there's a lot of dangers in there. But yes, he goes inside, uses the Lamplight Spirit, of course, the one that Nanahoshi had given him. Geese would scout up ahead. Talhand makes a comment about how, hey man, Paul, your son, he bringing all these really cool things. Geese was 10 steps ahead at all times, wearing a special pair of boots. I like if they actually show that in the anime, where he steps down, he has like a cross there. Obviously, there's going to be other footsteps in there because other adventurers have come down there. So Geese has a special like implant on his shoe to make an impression so that everybody knows where they need to step. Geese is always ahead of them. He knows the traps are, he knows where not to step. So everybody in a row will step exactly where he's stepping. He had cross-shaped steel plates mounted on his soles, leaving a shape where he walked. It wasn't magic, just a product of an adventurer's wisdom, protecting from slipping while marking the path. Teleport circles on the first floor were easy to spot. While many spiders skittered across the ground, they avoided certain spaces. These areas were traps. Avoiding the crunch of the spiders would mean that you were teleported somewhere else. As Geese spotted an enemy, Paul quickly dispatched it. He carried 2 swords. One was the same blade he wielded back home, his partner. It didn't appear very powerful, but the way that it sliced his opponent in two, it was probably due to skill. His left hand held a sword in a shape Rudeus hadn't seen before. Between a short and long sword, the handguard wrapped around the wielder's entire hand, with a slightly curved, double-sided blade with a hole in the middle, likely to prevent things from sticking to it. Paul generally fought with his right hand, so Rudeus wondered what the purpose of the left sword was. Maybe he was a nerd in his final form. Going dual-wielding. But yes, this is the point which Paul is showing off to Rudeus, constantly back. I like that expression on Rudeus' face, like, yeah, please stop, dude. I get it. You look cool. Stop. Don't let your guard down. But yeah, the whole point here is that Paul knows that this is a kind of a safe floor. Like the first floor, this is easy stuff. And so he's kind of taking advantage of the moment to kind of ease the tension of Rudeus' first time. And again, he's trying to show off how cool he is at the same time. And yes, Elinalise doesn't like it because she's supposed to be in the front. She's supposed to be the vanguard, but yet he keeps jumping up ahead. And this is where we get kind of an odd omission by the anime, and I'm not really sure why, because it does technically point it out, but it doesn't actually say it. Elinalise protested, "Besides, you've been going far too ahead the whole time. I'm the one in front, am I not? It's the first floor, not like it'll make a big difference." Talhand gave a grunt. There they go again. Elinalise said, "Myself aside, this is Rudeus' first time in Labyrinth, and as an adult, you should be setting a good example. That's why I'm looking for a good opportunity to strike up a conversation with him, to help him loosen up. What nonsense. You seem as giddy now as you were when Zenith first joined the party. Not much I can say when you put it like that. You've turned into a nag." "Why, of course I have. You're basically like a son to me. So I'll scold you as needed," Elinalise said. "What are you on about? Calling me son? Did you spend too much time with Rudeus that you developed a soft spot for me? Come on, enough with that. You calling yourself my mom gives me the creeps." That's when Elinalise said, "Oh my, has Rudeus not told you?" "Told me what?" "Sylphie is my granddaughter. Since Rudeus married her, that also makes him my grandchild. In that case, as a parent of my grandchild, you and Zenith are basically like children to me." I don't know why the anime skipped this. It's such a good scene. Because again, for those that don't remember, every time that Rudeus and Elinalise have some sort of conversation that could lead to them possibly making out with each other, Elinalise says, "No, I don't want to be related in any way or married into a family with Paul. I don't want to be in a family with Paul." That's her thing. And here she's literally throwing it in Paul's face. And again, it's weird because the anime actually has them walking away and Rudeus thinks, man, he doesn't know. But this is a scene where she literally says it. Paul froze, slowly turned, and marched to Rudeus. Formation was broke, causing everyone to stop. "Hey, what is she talking about, Rudy? Why is Elinalise making some insane claims about Sylphie being her grandkid? Turns out Laz is Elinalise's son." "Laz was? He never said a word about that to me." "Well, there's a lot that happened in the past, so it seemed like he wanted to keep Miss Elinalise's identity a secret." "Ah, I see. Kind of understand that. More importantly, we should keep going, and take care not to let your guard down." Paul agreed and returned to his position. "Seriously? So Elinalise is tied to our family now? Can't believe this." It's such a good scene. I hate that the anime skipped it. After this, they came to a road that was teeming with dead road tarantulas. This was Rudeus' job as a mage to handle. Talhand offered Rudeus some advice before he proceeded, warning against fire magic, as it would fill the room with poison. Claiming intoxication magic didn't work. Rudeus assumed that he was referring to carbon monoxide poisoning. He also wanted Rudeus to avoid hitting the ceiling as to not destroy the cave. Ice was preferred magic, as water could cause damage to the cave. He could use earth magic, but it could trigger a collapse, if he ended up using dirt of the labyrinth rather than conjuring his own. In the end, he used what was recommended to him, conjuring advanced tier water magic, Blizzard Storm. Yeah, again, right there is that implication that Talhand, he used earth magic, so this is why they're having trouble, is because they're not equipped with a good team to actually get through. When they had Roxy, they were doing really well because she's basically doing exactly what Reese is doing right here. Talhand spoke up. "Oh, so you really are Roxy's apprentice. You even use the same magic." Apparently, she had utilized the same spell. That made him happy to hear. "And no incantations either. I can see why she's so proud of you." His words made Rudeus' ego swell with pride as he mopped off the rest and moved on. Their focus was on utilizing the teleportation circles and cross-reference what was written in the book. While they had already mapped out the teleportation circles on the first floor, it helped verify the accuracy of the book. They compared shape, color, characteristics until they were satisfied to continue further. After 5 hours passed, they headed to the last area on the first floor, which housed 2 circles lined up next to each other, larger and glowing more intense than the ones before. The darker blue one led to the next floor, but it had a twin with the same shape beside it. To the uninitiated, they both looked like the real deal. Yet there was a rock with a circle inscribed on it, placed immediately before one of them. Geese left this behind as a signal that it was a correct one. Confirming it to match the book, they hopped on it. Arriving on the second floor, the skittering spiders were no longer around, and tarantula nests reduced. Instead, they had iron crawlers slithering around, 1 meter tall and 2 meters long. They were fast though, despite their appearances. Additionally, they worked with the spiders as shields while they shot webs. While caught in the web, the heavy 1-ton crawler would trample you. Since Paul couldn't defeat the iron crawlers in one strike, Reese handled the tarantulas with Blizzard Storm, while using stone cannon on the iron crawlers, all while Paul and Elinalise kept them occupied. Normally, iron crawlers would repel stone cannon, but they didn't seem a problem for him. This tactic left Talhand bored, being on standby near Rudeus. They were working prudently as possible, A good thing, as they could reserve Talhand for later on if they needed. Yeah, this is our first example about how these monsters in this labyrinth are actually really smart. They're actually utilizing the others to guard while they attack. Utilizing his demon eye, he was able to avoid webs from the tarantulas. Even if one hit him, fire magic could get rid of it. Still, Paul and Elinalise couldn't dodge every single one. While Rudeus could burn them away, Geese brought along a liquid that would dissolve it. Elinalise hated the stuff though, because it irritated her skin, almost like a detergent. He wondered if he could try to use it on dishes back home. At some point, Geese called them to take a break. Talhand and Elinalise took watch while Paul cleaned his gear. Seeing how quickly and practical he was about it, reminded Rudeus that he was a pro in his field. What is it? You better hurry up, Rudy. Oh, yes. Turning his attention to his own gear, he didn't have much to inspect, since he was ranged. But he realized Paul was being awfully quiet. On the first floor, he came to him during his breaks and would talk to him casually. It was to be expected. This was the second floor, but he had turned serious. As Paul got frustrated about the gunk on his gear, Rudeus suggested that he use the liquid that Geese gave him. Sure enough, it was a sort of detergent, taking the gunk right off. Maybe Sylphie would like some back at home. As Paul got re-equipped and relieved Elinalise of watch, Rudeus considered doing the same, but Geese stopped him. He said, "Boss, don't worry about Lookout." "Are you sure?" "It's fine. The old man hasn't done any work anyways. Besides, there's something coming up here I'd like to get your opinion on anyways. Is it really okay for me to stand in for my father on that?" "Of course. You're much smarter than him anyhow." Geese then took out the book and 2 maps from his bag. One map was beautifully drawn, and the other was unfinished. He said, "We'll be on the 3rd floor soon. This is where Roxy got separated from us. If we're lucky, she should be around this area, if that book's anything to go off of." "All right." According to the book, Traps sent you to areas on the same floor. Even though it was called a random warp, it wouldn't just suddenly send you to the boss on the final floor. Roxy had been warped on the 3rd floor. They had no idea if the circle she had stepped on was random or fixed destination. But if she was still alive, there was a good chance that she's on the 3rd floor. If luck favored her, she made it to the 2nd or 1st floor. But she traversed those floors numerous times. Considering her strength, if she made it to the 2nd floor, she would have left already. It was difficult to imagine that she went further to the 4th floor. Geese then asked if there was any magic that would help them find her. But Rudeus said no, unfortunately not. Geese then said, "Boss, just use your intuition for us. Where do you think Roxy would be?" "My intuition, huh? We can't afford to cover this entire labyrinth with a fine-tuned comb. So if we're going to look for her, we're going to need intuition." "All right, then how about this area?" For the sake of it, Rudeus randomly selected an area that was empty on the map. "East of where she was teleported, huh? Okay, we'll start the search there." Rudeus did feel like heading east was the most efficient way to go. After all, there was no one in the group with analytical capabilities of pinpointing her location. They would just have to search where they haven't invested regardless. Yeah, this kind of makes you wonder, why east? Or when Rudeus was transported, the assumption is that he went east. I guess he could have gone west and around the globe or something like that, but still. According to Geese, the lack of Roxy in their party meant they couldn't break through the 2nd floor. The monsters in this labyrinth were resistant to Talhand's preferred school of magic. He couldn't cover the front. Vierra wasn't reliable and couldn't cover people as well as Elinalise. To get through here, they needed someone with ice or fire magic. It was a wonder how they made it back without Roxy. Geese then said, "I thought we could make do somehow, but there aren't many magicians in this area, and not one with the grit to challenge the teleportation labyrinth." I mean, it makes sense. If somebody were being told, "Hey, this teleportation labyrinth, come help us over here," I can see a magician not wanting to do that. Because yes, if they step on a trap, they're going to be on their own, and as a magician, I can see that being very terrifying. Geese was trying to find a solution on his own. Rudeus seen him trying to recruit someone. "It seems that we put you through a lot of trouble, Mr. Geese." Don't worry about it. Also, I told you to call me newbie, didn't I? You give me the creeps talking all polite like that. Got it, newbie. I'll introduce you to a nice monkey girl after this is all over, and you can have her pluck the fleas off your back. He's totally talking about Goliad from the university. Oh, not bad, since I can't even go to the adult districts here. Hey, wait, who you call a monkey? Rudeus had a lot that he wanted to discuss with Geese, but he left that for now. They confirmed their route. There was many uncharted areas on the 2nd floor. He wondered if Roxy or Zenith was in one of those areas. Not checking them made him feel uneasy, but they had to get to the 3rd floor. The best place to search wasn't the closest, but rather the place Roxy was likely. Elinalise then inserted herself in the conversation, asking their location. They would be moving beyond the 2nd floor soon. While she complained about the monsters changing formation partway through, she ran her hand over her hair, her usual proud curls, looking unkempt. "By the way, Geese, why do you call Rudeus boss?" "Yeah, well, we got to know each other in Doldia jail." "Doldia jail? You mean the one that Ghislaine talked about before? How in the world did that happen? I'll tell you more about it when we get home." Geese shot a grin. It brought back memories to Rudeus, experiencing true freedom, being naked. Something he couldn't do anymore, except for in bed. He clearly wasn't too nervous to have thoughts like that. 10 hours after they first entered, they arrived on the 3rd floor. They were moving quite swiftly. Rudeus thought it would take several days to get this far, but they had the book now. Rudeus then felt something unsettling in the air, radiating from deep within the cave. The real thing started here. First, they had to find Roxy. Just then, Her familiar scent came wafting through the air. No, it wasn't his imagination. This really was her smell. Her presence that he felt. He wouldn't mistake this. He could feel his heart racing. She was there. He was certain. And that's when we get to chapter 4, her emotional perspective, the skipped chapter of Roxy and her time in the Teleportation Labyrinth, which this is such a good chapter because, again, it gives us both insight into Roxy, what she went through, the pain, suffering that she went through, and yes, a lot of insight into her own insecurities and her family and everything like that. Plus, again, how crafty and terrifyingly crafty these monsters are. Roxy was inside a narrow, dark space, barely as tall as her, and wide enough for 2 people to lie down. She arrived here after teleporting several times. As long as she was within this cramped area, no monsters could teleport in. As she sat at the edge of the space against the wall, she gazed down at the teleportation circle before her. If she put just one foot in it, she'd be sent somewhere. Most likely a monster's den, filled with dozens of monsters, and likely her death. A month ago, she stumbled. She was evading an attack directed at her. She stepped back, tripped over a rock, lost her balance, and her foot found a magic circle. Even though she had gone over where the traps were before battle, she so easily stepped on one. She was teleported to a place full of monsters. 20. No, 30 of them. She was a magician, a good one, able to shorten her incantations, and facing a vast number of enemies wasn't new to her. Surrounded, she didn't panic and eradicated her enemy. But they kept coming. The beast knew exactly where the teleporters went. She was prepared to die. She could defeat all the monsters, but her mana wasn't endless. Even at 20%, the monsters didn't cease. She was cornered. Help wasn't coming. Perhaps they abandoned her. If she was in their shoes, she wouldn't save a klutz like her. No matter your mana, if you were foolish enough to step on a trap, you were just dead weight. No, they weren't the type to do that. Maybe they were caught up in a teleporter too, or they were lacking combat strength in her absence and had to withdraw temporarily. Regardless, help wasn't coming. As she felt her mana dwindle and the threat of tears welling up, she spotted a light. 6 magic circles in a spacious room, monsters appearing from all but one of them. She figured no monsters were on the other side of that single one. She finished off the monsters and hopped on, ending up to where she was now. She had survived. Her luck had held. She fed off her food supply and made her own water, waiting out a day for her mana to replenish. The next day, she stepped on the magic circle. Appearing somewhere else, she realized it was a random warp. She mapped the area and forged onward to escape. She could wait for help, but there was a possibility that Paul and the others were dead. Random teleportation traps were just that deadly. She wove through the tunnels, marking each teleportation circle as she stepped on them. The teleportation labyrinth was designed to make it impossible to get anywhere without doing that. She stepped carefully for traps, continued forward, not knowing if she was making progress. It was impossible to get your bearings in this labyrinth. She was anxious, but she had to press on. Her food wouldn't last forever, nor her mind. She even feasted on monster meat. Yet, after countless teleportations, she was once again sent back to a den of monsters. She fought and found herself yet another circle from which no beast appeared. That was how she made it back to this little space. How many times did she repeat this cycle? 5? 10? The circle in this room was random, but she always ended up back here. She was exhausted, her heart and mind at its limit. According to her internal clock, about a month had passed, a month of no progress. She had also taken damage and was growing faint from blood loss. The monsters were even blocking the circle so she couldn't escape. They were quite intelligent, taking everything that she had to break through. Her joints hurt, she was out of food, and the monster meat was awful, being so toxic that you had to use detoxification just to eat it. She was cornered and had no idea what would happen next. The next group of enemies might be more coordinated, tear her limb to limb. If she made it through, she'd be back here again. Those thoughts alone kept her from stepping on that circle once again. The beast likely noticed her presence, knew she was in a cramped place. She was sure they were all waiting for her to make a fatal mistake in her exhaustion. For the first time, she was conscious of death. Monsters would consume her, leave no proof of her existence behind. She was terrified, grinding her teeth together, driven by impulse to scream. She gripped her staff tight. She had seen death countless times. As an adventurer, she'd seen monsters shred and crush others. She knew one day it would be her turn, yet she also believed she'd make it through. Yet now, she was terrified of death. She still hadn't accomplished anything, still so much that she wanted to do. She had dreams of becoming a teacher. She loved teaching people, despite no talent for it. She still enjoyed it, so much so that after saving Zenith, she wanted to take the teacher's exam at the University of Magic and become a professor. Her teacher, she had a falling out with, was there. They may bicker again, but she had a feeling they would get along better now. He loved being at the center of attention. She wouldn't be surprised if he was promoted to vice principal while she was gone. Makes you wonder, is that genius? She wanted a taste of normal happiness, become a professor, get married, fall in love, have passionate nights together. She had a stumpy little body of a child as a demon, but she had to have a chance. She let out a self-deprecating chuckle, indulging in such fantasies under these circumstances. She was going to die, and none of her dreams would come true. She never heard of people saved in this predicament before. She decided once again to step on that circle. She wanted to live. Again, emphasis here. She's been here for a month. Again, she was teleported somewhere unfamiliar. Once again, finding herself at a monster's den. They blocked her escape with the bodies of fallen monsters. She had no choice but to clear the way to escape. While facing this horde, she said, their formation was impeccable. Iron crawlers in the front, tarantulas behind it, and a mud skull throwing stones. They were like an army. She created Earth Fortress, covering her body up to her head before cutting it off, using it to stop the iron crawlers. Then, water cascade, shooting bullets to stop their movements. Icicle filled, to freeze the previous water and stopping the front line. Then a blizzard to skewer the beasts in the back. This was a tactic that she used while traversing the labyrinth near Shierra, guaranteeing victory. But more monsters came pouring through the magic circles. The place was brimming with beasts. Again, in a blink of an eye, she was overcome with despair, saying, I suppose it really is hopeless. Without moving the corpses, she wasn't going to make it out. There was just too many to handle. The mud skull was shattering her fortress. Iron crawlers bearing down on her. She unleashed a flame slice, killing the iron crawler. Fire was effective, but it could cause your own death. Still, she had no choice. She raised another earth fortress. While her mana was dwindling, she began to panic. What was she to do? Think. She racked her brain while she was unleashing magic at the enemy, but nothing came to mind. Was she going to die? Her body on autopilot while she had those thoughts. Her mind fuzzy as she ran dry on mana. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Her entire life flashed before her eyes. The disappointed look on her face when her parents realized that she couldn't converse with her village. They taught her to speak because they pitied her. She learned magic after a traveling magician came to the village and left a deep impression on her. Equipped with basic tier water magic, she set out from the village, meeting 3 boys and forming her first party. After traveling several years, one of the members died and the party disbanded. She then set out from the central continent, met many people, and enrolled at the University of Magic. It was her first time taking formal classes in anything, and it had a lasting impact. She was talented, accomplished a great deal, and earned jealousy of those around her. At the dorm, her friend and her would lounge in bed and talk about all manners of things. She would meet her master several years later. He was the one that taught her saint-level water magic. She learned so fast, it went to her head. He got on to her, which pissed her off. So, she graduated and left without a word to him. She then set out to the capital of the Oscar Kingdom, certain that someone exceptional as her could find work. She was wrong, though, failing to find anything there or in the countryside. But then she found a job for a home tutor. That's how she met Paul's family. Paul's sexual encounters titillated her. Rudy's talent shocked her. She was jealous, but grew a sense of respect for him since he didn't let it go to his head. Before parting, she taught him Saint Tier water magic. She then started delving into labyrinths near the kingdom of Shierra. The kingdom then hired her to teach magic to Prince Pax, which reminded her again how amazing Rudeus was, as well as how little talent she had as a teacher. She made a book for Rudy before growing disgusted by her job and leaving Shierra. She then learned of the displacement incident, met Elinalise and Talhand, and then set out for the Demon Continent. When she was reunited with her parents, she found that they really did love her. After that, she met Kishirika, and then all the memories ran in an instant. An iron crawler bearing down on her, and her fire magic had melted the Frost Nova. I can't do this. I don't want to die. I don't want to. No. She screamed in her head. Screaming, she swung her staff around. Her staff was pulled away by a web, and she inched backwards to the wall behind her. There was nothing left for her to do. Closing her eyes, her last thought was being unable to see her mother and father again. After a bit, nothing came. Maybe she had died instantly. Peeling her eyes open, she see an unimaginable vista before her. A world of ice. Everything frozen and pure white statues. Everything was frozen solid. The gulf of power between this spell and hers was vast. Her own merely freezing the surface of things. This had likely killed everything in the area. She reached for her staff, but dropped it as a sensation of ice shut up her fingers. Oh, thank God, someone said. A young man walked towards her, weaving around the ice statues. The moment she seen him, her heart started pounding. Blood rushed to her face. This man was her ideal type. He was tall, with soft hair and gentle features. He was draped in a gray robe and held a staff, but was well built for a magician. His face looked relieved as he approached, gazing down at her. He rushed up, wrapped his arms around her, buried his face in her neck, seemingly overcome with emotions. He was inhaling deeply. She then realized something. She hadn't bathed in a month. She then pushed him back, but realized that she did something terrible. After he had saved her life, but she didn't want him to think that she was stinky. But why was she worrying about that? She couldn't think straight. My apologies, it just kind of stinks. I stink? I'm sorry. He sniffed his sleeve. No, not you. My body. I've been in here for a month. Oh, that's what you mean. It doesn't really bother me, though. Well, it does bother me. She thought, forget. It doesn't matter right now. Thank you so much for saving me. No, not at all. It was only natural. That puzzled her. It didn't seem natural to face this kind of horde. She then cleared her throat. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. My name is Roxy McGurdia. If you don't mind, may I have your name as well? He looked puzzled. Make my acquaintance? Huh? Oh, have we met before? If so, I must apologize. I'm afraid I don't remember. She did get a sense that she had seen him somewhere before. He sort of resembled Paul. Poor Rudeus, mistaken for his father, the dirtbag. His face went pale as he muttered, You don't remember? Don't remember? He staggered backwards, slapped his hand over his mouth, then threw up. Soon after, she discovered it was Rudy, all grown up. A little later, Paul and the others caught up and took her into their care. With that, she narrowly escaped death. And that is the unfortunately skipped chapter of Roxy's perspective in the Teleportation Labyrinth, which again, like I said earlier, I expected they were going to skip that. But overall, this entire segment was really well put together. I think, despite not having most of the context around Roxy and her struggles surviving in there, that later scene of, even though there were CGI monsters kind of coming after her, it looked good. It's just like the spiders. The spiders were CGI. It didn't look bad. All the like close-up shots of the monsters themselves all look 2D animation, and it all looks great. And the action scenes themselves were fantastic. Paul and Elinalise darting through that room and just cutting them all down. Again, even though Reese is supposed to just freeze it all and kill it, they're going in there to show some action. But no, just her being like terrified, them coming after her, and then just suddenly ice. Everything is frozen. I like the note there that her whole tactic is to bring up a shield, douse them with water, and then freeze them, and then shoot down spikes and kill them. And again, she's noting the idea that there's a massive difference between what I'm doing and what this person just did. He is freezing them solid, whereas she's just making like a frozen layer over them that keeps them from moving. Rudeus literally froze the entire room in an instant. Like, he literally rushed in there, freeze, and it was just done and over with. So really, really crazy difference there. But like I said, I just love that perspective of Roxy. Her life pretty much went through her entire lifespan right there, talking about her being at home, learning from some magician that went by, and then going out and being an adventurer, traveling the world, eventually meeting Rudeus, going to train Pax, and then eventually going to Labyrinths, which we've noted before that she's kind of desiring to find that special someone, and here's that Prince Charming that randomly shows up to save her from the Labyrinth. So it's super goofy. I love it. I just ate every minute of it up in the novel, and despite it not being the entire thing, was fantastic in the anime. But again, the rest of the whole thing is just really kind of meeting up with Paul again, which is really emotional. Elinalise and her constantly bickering with him, which is fantastic. Meeting Talhand, getting Geese back in the picture. All this stuff was fantastic. But I hope you guys enjoyed this skip content impressions video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment. Let me know what you think of this segment. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I will be doing a skip content video for Norn and the Mills Church sometime this week, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But I greatly appreciate you guys' support. If you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips, links, to thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate by that supports the channel, and y'all take care.